30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get started. Again, bringing legal certainty to a blockchain-based token economy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I want to thank Martin and his presentation because that was actually the best preparation for my presentation. The Liechtenstein Blockchain Act, something about my person. I used to code software for about 10 years, so I have an IT background. I'm a lawyer from Liechtenstein, a small principality, and I'm also president of the Crypto Country Association. And I got involved because normally people ask you what was your first connection to this new topic. And I started actually my PhD in 2013 about this technology. And as a matter of fact, I never finished it because I was busy writing laws as a lawyer, which is a big honor. I was able to go after Liechtenstein Blockchain Act and doing presentations like this, which is more fun actually than writing PhDs. But I will finish that hopefully this year. That's actually my plan. So we'll have a short intro to Liechtenstein, just basic figures that you get the information you need to understand why this might be useful for all of Europe and not only for Liechtenstein, or maybe hopefully at least some ideas might be helpful. Then I will try to answer the question why we create new legislation and doesn't follow the Swiss way of say basically no, we don't need a special law for that. And to understand the legal definition, we will have a little bit of tech background for the token coins to understand how we define the token. And I have to excuse myself, it's always a problem for a lot of people. It's too techy, it's too much information about the tech part of it. And for some others, it's boring because they heard it 1,000 times. So I just try to find a way of not boring everybody. And yeah, sure, and then in the end we will have the legal definition and just a summarization. And you see, even with PowerPoint you have scalability issues. You cannot display a video properly, but the idea is just that you know that we are a real country. We are very small, but we are there, and we do have wine grapes as well. But what is interesting is that we are located between Austria and Switzerland. We are very close to Germany, and that gives us access to, our currency is Swiss franc, but we are also a financial center. So we have, for our size, 15 banks, 16 fund companies, 400 trust companies, insurance companies, almost 40 and more than 100 asset management companies. We are a principality, as I already said. We have a GDP of 6.1 billion, AAA rated, so we have no debt. We have 4,700 companies, and one which might be known as Hilti, the drilling company. And we have over 1,000 commuters a day. So we have a lot of Austrians and Swiss people working in our country. And that's a crucial thing. We are a member of the European Economic Area, and therefore a lot of European legislation is applicable in Liechtenstein. But we have special agreements with Switzerland as well. So we are actually a perfect hub if you want to access the single market of the European Union and Switzerland as well. And for this topic, for this topic, special relevant is the Financial Market Authority, our regulator. They are open-minded in a way that you can approach them and talk to them, and you will get answers within weeks. There were times early 2017 the Financial Market Authority and said, yeah, we have a blockchain project. We need to discuss some details. When would you be available? They said, yeah, if you can come this afternoon or tomorrow or the day after. And now even our Financial Market Authority has a queue, so you have to wait a little bit. But it's weeks, and they will grant you time so you can talk to them. And What is happening in Liechtenstein, I will not go into detail, but you see that I mean, we had this ICO bubble as well in 2018. We had a lot of ICOs in Liechtenstein. We have a lot of exchanges, trading facilities. These were the hot topics approaching our financial market authority. I want to point out that actually, and I want to challenge that, we always say that we were the first country within the European Economic Area framework where a security prospectus was approved by the Financial Market Authority and then afterwards passported to the European Union. So if there's nobody here in this room telling me that this is not the truth, 30th of August 2018, this is still the case, because the Austrians claimed that they were the first, and I think like everybody tries to claim that they were the first. I know this because when we announced that on stage, and the head of banking of the Financial Market Authority was on stage as well, he was a little bit, let's say, nervous that we really published that. And everybody is reading about that Liechtenstein has approved the first, or the Financial Market Authority has approved the first security prospectus for a security token offering. This slide is just that, yes, there is something happening in Liechtenstein. We have meetups, we have events, we have a lot of service providers focusing on that. We even have some names which are globally known. And our biggest project, and one of the first ones, was Eternity. They do an own blockchain that try to address the scalability issues and a lot of other stuff. And Janislav Malahov is quite known in the industry. But I think what is crucial here, and what is also quite known, at least in Europe, is that we have banking solutions for blockchain-related companies. So Bank Frick is there for sure, one of the banks which is doing business and banking, or providing banking services for most of the big names globally as well. Why create new legislation? When we sat together 2.5, it's almost 3 years now, actually the government approached us and said, yeah, come on, let's do a work group together and see if there's something in this new thing called Bitcoin, blockchain, and this development. And we sat together, and actually, Martin, you pointed out the basic questions, and we said, okay, what do we have? I mean, if we do, if we draft an own act, if we have a specific legislation, it doesn't make sense just to have a legislation to get the marketing or whatever. I mean, you really have to try to solve problems. And we sat together and said, okay, what are the big challenges? And I will not go into detail because Martin perfectly pointed that out. But yeah, we said we will not only say, yeah, if you do a fundraiser and if you do an ICO, you have to do this and that. We said, what's really crucial from a civil law perspective if you want to transfer a token from A to B? How can you do that it's legally binding? How do we have to amend our legal framework to make all of this tokenization possible? How is it possible to create that link between the real world and this digital world? And that was actually the goal. And so we said, okay, let's do that. Let's try to find a way to answer at least some of the questions we have and to do an own act. And as I told you that we are part of the European Economic Area, the second question you have to ask is it anyhow possible to have an own law? Because there are already a lot of laws and provisions you have to follow when you, for example, do an ICO as well. I mean, most of the clients we had, and we did over 100 projects out of Liechtenstein, we had to tell them, yes, that's fine, but what you're doing, that really sounds like e-money, or what your business model sounds like e-money, for example. So in the end, even if the fundraiser is not a licensed, is not licensed by itself, maybe your business model is. Or, I mean, taxes. I mean, we saw a lot of projects, they raised whatever amount of money, they didn't convert it to fiat, and in the end of the first business year, they had to pay taxes, and taxes had to be paid in fiat. So we do have the first bankruptcy proceeding in Liechtenstein as well. So if you don't do that right, you already have a problem. And a lot of questions are already answered. You just have to look at the existing framework. But there were some big questions open, and we tried to find an answer to that. And on the other hand, sure, I mean, we are part of the European Economic Area, therefore all of these financial market laws, they are applicable to us. So we will not be able to say, yeah, that's a thing which is actually covered by the Prospectus Directive, but we don't care. I mean, that's not possible. So we had to find, and I think that's an existing framework. That works. I mean, you don't have to amend it. And the good thing about it is that you get access to the single market. So if you have a prospectus from the Liechtenstein, which is approved by the Liechtenstein Financial Market Authority, you can then address the single market in the European Union. And so we will not change anything about that. So if you do that, if you do a security token offering in Liechtenstein, that's basically the same as you do it in some other countries in the European Union, because it's just harmonized. But there is a small space where we said, okay, there we have to do something to release the full potential of that token economy. And then we said, okay, what we will need for sure is a definition of a token. Because as we already heard, nobody really, I mean, if you Google, and that's actually fun. Lawyers really Google. Yeah, we do the same. Okay. So we Googled it as well and said, okay, what's this term, token? And we find some answers. Yeah, it's a physical, it's a token, physical money that is privately minted. I do remember the second icon there. That was like the thing you had to use to access your e-banking system, like the second token, the identification method. It also now stands for cryptocurrencies and many more. And interesting is the last icon, the T. And just for the ones who are familiar with Solidity, the coding language of Ethereum, these are the brackets used in this in Solidity. And I will not go into the. If somebody is coding, you know, this is just a basic function of an Ethereum ERC20. Actually, here you define what the token, what the functions of the tokens are, and how it is reacting, and that's actually what a token looks like in the way as we code it. Like if you have a software coder, they do it in that way. I mean, a computer then they don't use that one. I mean, it's a 0 and 1 and 0 and 1 and 0 and 1, but that's human readable code. That's how you code a token. So I'm really glad that not half of the room already left. I try not to go too much into detail, but that's the thing. If you try to legally define a token, you have to understand that even, especially if you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, the two big ones, the model is completely different. For example, if I want to know how much Bitcoin one address has, what you do is you just go through all transactions and look which transactions ended up to the address you're looking at. And then you have to look if there are any transactions from that address. So you look through all transactions and see, okay, there is one transaction to this address, and then you see there's not any transaction from this address, so you know, okay, there's one Bitcoin attached to that address. Ethereum has an accounting model. In Ethereum, you have an address, and you have a table, and you have an amount dedicated to that address. So it's a completely different model. And the problem you have with that is when you discuss with regulators and lawyers and try to analyze what does that mean in the sense of property law, because it's really hard to define that if a token can be a thing, because in Liechtenstein and in Switzerland and in some other jurisdictions, to be a thing, you have to have a physical component. And a token doesn't have a physical component. It's information stored on a ledger. And I mean, depending on the model, it's not stored in a way that you say there's one attached to this. So that's really hard to find a proper solution to answer that question. And the second thing is that this token, they can look, that's just two blockchains, but they can look whatever. They can have different functions. They can, the basic functions actually are always the same. You have to have an amount of tokens, that's total supply, and you have to be able to transfer the token from A to B. And what was, and that's for the legal part is interesting again. With the new standards, the CryptoKitties, we already heard that with your answer about why you don't use Ethereum. You have this token ID where you can identify each token because it can give it an ID. But if you talk about tokenization, you need to identify a specific token, because this, if a token represents the ownership rights of a car, let's say an old-timer, 78, whatever, you want exactly that car. And so you have to identify this token. Because if you use a standard Bitcoin, I mean, I don't care if I get this or that Bitcoin. Okay, I mean, let's forget about all of these issues with AML and that they were tumbled and whatever. But in the end, if I get, let's say, a 100 euro from Martin or a 100 euro from me, I don't care. It's the same. It's a 100 euro. But if you want to tokenize things, it's crucial that you can identify the tokens. This is the technology which allows that. So we said, okay, to sum that up, a token is an information that doesn't have any underlying, that's Bitcoin basically, or it represents an underlying. And we said, how can we make that as flexible as possible? And we said, okay, if you have a right and you try to tokenize, let's say, a car, you don't tokenize the car. What you do is you tokenize a right you have to that car. Let's say the ownership right. That might be the biggest right you can have. But you can have, let's say, if I'm the owner of a car and Martin is interested in my 1971 old-timer, he might to use it someday. And he said, okay, but I'm not interested to be an owner, but I want to use it every Sunday, for example. So he might be interested just in the usage right of that car. So as long as it is a right, it can be tokenized in the Liechtenstein blockchain.
Could I?
Sure.
I mean, are the rights limited to user rights or also ownership rights?
No, it's also ownership rights. Okay. It's not. It's every right you can have. The IP rights, yeah, whatever. That's the basic concept of it. And we said, okay, is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we said, what are the basic functions of a token? Legitimization is one of the functions, because I have to tell the person, okay, I'm the holder of the token, and now I'm the person who is able to do things with it. You have the liberation function. For example, if you tokenize shares, and the company then pays dividends to the token holders, the company has to be sure that they don't have to pay again. So that's another crucial function. And we already heard about the transportation function. And with the transportation function, you have all of these scalability things. All of this, like it's more efficient, it's more, it's cost effective, it's faster and easier. I can transfer my ownership rights to that car to Uruguay within 10 minutes, and the only thing I need is an app. So these are the main three functions. And what are the advantages? I mean, we heard a lot about the challenges, but what are the advantages? Just to sum it up, I think everybody's on the same page. If you have something which is transferable in such an easy way, it might be just a lot more efficient. And if the approach is that you are very flexible. So if you say, I don't care which right it is, especially in the Liechtenstein legal framework, we don't care which right it is, as long as you put it to a token, then you have all of this efficiency. And now a lot of questions, and we heard some of them already come to your mind. What if I transfer a token from A to B about a physical thing, and in the end the physical thing is not existing? Then I have a token which should represent the ownership right of a car, and the car is not existing. So you have to find answers to that. But if you do that, and let's just assume that this is working, I mean, you can build a lot of services around it. If I have that car, for example, and I need some liquidity, I can actually give that token to the bank, and the bank will then grant me a loan based on that token. Or you can have like insurance policy, or you can have like, let's say, if you have a wallet which has one token representing a share, another one representing a car, you can build a lot of services on top of that. So let's say it makes sense in some, not in all areas, but at least in some, we might see that this makes sense. We need a definition for a token. And we got rid of this token classification we have seen the last years, that there are currency coins, security and equity, and utility token. Because in our opinion, especially for that framework, it doesn't make sense to qualify because, I mean, at least the tokens I saw, they're all hybrid models. I mean, in the end, there are some real only utilities and real only securities, but in most cases, it's a hybrid model, and it's not answering some, I mean, questions at all. It's just trying to understand it and classify it a little bit. So we said if you want to have a very tech agnostic and a functional approach, we said a token is an information on a TT system. TT stands for trusted technology, and we know that it's actually a trustless technology, but it's hard to bring that to Parliament that there's a technology which is trustless, and then they should accept it. So we said it's a trusted technology that can represent reasonable claims or membership rights of a person, rights in property or other absolute and or relative rights, ensuring the assignment of one or more public keys. The last part, we don't know yet if this keeps the same, because it's not the final version of the Blockchain Act. It's just the draft, and hopefully it will be in Parliament in April, May. But this might change because there are other technologies which are trustworthy and don't use the public-private key system. And the idea was to have it in a way a judge with a lot of reading understands what we try to do on the one hand, and on the other hand that he can tokenize a lot of rights, and that it is working from a legal perspective. And what is the big deal here is that if you have a look at it at this Liechtenstein Blockchain Act, which is actually 170 pages, you see that this embodiment of rights of all kinds is the basic, that you really can tokenize everything. That's the idea. I'm not a believer that we have to tokenize the world, please. No, I'm not. But it makes sense for some applications. But we don't want to limit it to this and that use case, for example, like tokenization of shares. Because tokenization of shares already happens, that's a thing we see. But there might be other things. And we said what we'll need is, we will have own provisions how you transfer a token from A to B. And if you transfer a token from A to B, and you're in good faith, in the end you can really believe that you are now the owner, and you now have the ownership right to that car. Because what does that help if I buy a token representing an ownership right of a car? I already said that, and then you don't get the car. And we said, okay, that's just some of the ideas we see. We see IP rights, assets, securities, commodities, currency as well, utility, and others. And we said that already. But what is crucial in that system that this works is the link to the real world. And I want to point out the physical validator and just explain you in the time I have left about the concept of the physical validator. So we don't have a central registry, as Martin suggested. What we have is we have a role defined by that act, and entrepreneurs can apply. It's actually kind of, it is a registration. It's not a license you obtain by the Financial Market Authority. It's a registration, and you have to fulfill certain requirements that you can apply for this physical validator. And then you can provide the services. And the service is actually, if I want to tokenize, let's do an easy example. a piece of art. If I then transfer the token and this art doesn't exist, that doesn't make any sense. We heard that a lot of times. So what we have to do is, you have to bring that art to the physical validator. The physical validator validates that this is the piece of art you want to tokenize. You are the legal owner of that piece of art. And then he has several options, but in the end he's responsible. So if it's the Mona Lisa, there might be good reasons to put it in a safe and not to give it back. But he can take it in custody, for example. And that's maybe the use case which makes the most sense. But he also, if it's a thing, for example, which the person who tokenizes wants to use it, he can have an insurance. And we all know that insurances for these kind of things, they are not available at the moment. So at the moment, it's really taking it into custody. So if, let's say, I then issue that token and I transfer the token to B and B transfers it, Martin, I'm so sorry, but to you.
If you did it really.
Yes, yeah, that's fine. And if Martin now wants to make use of his ownership rights to the tokenized Mona Lisa, he can come to the physical validator and say, please, I'm the token holder, please hand over this Mona Lisa. And so you have that link, and this is necessary. We thought that this is necessary, that this token economy, the tokenization of physical assets really work. But we thought of others. Did you understand the basic concept? So it's not that you have to rely on the guy who tells you that you will get something, or on the IT firm which is coding. You will have a legal system, a regulation, where there's a licensed person taking things in custody, or you can have a claim against him. Okay? I think because that's actually the last slide, so I can answer questions afterwards. Or you want to do it now? Does it matter? Yeah, we can do it now.
Okay. It was just what thoughts have gone into the scalability of this physical validator function? Because it seems to me that unless you're going to turn all of Liechtenstein into a big storage room, this is not going. I mean, this may work for pieces of art, but it's not going to work for pork bellies or cars or ships or.
Yeah, we don't have an airport, so we will not be able to have a physical validator for ships. But that's the thing. Sure. I mean, we thought that for you can opt in actually. You can say if you want to tokenize a piece of art and it's very valuable. You can use the physical validator, and then you have this quality label that if this is done and you find the validator on the registry of the Financial Market Authority, okay, there's something behind it in the end, But if you, let's say, tokenize your bicycle, and because you just want to do it because it's fun, you don't have to use the physical validator. But it's an easy way that people can really look it up and say, okay, there's something behind it. That was the concept, or is the concept. Please.
No, but it makes 100%. It's a way of extending the trustworthiness of Liechtenstein, or it could be other small places where there are financial services based on trust. That you can so in that sense, it makes total sense that you would have a booming industry of physical validators in Liechtenstein. But is it the challenge, I guess, is that if I want to use it for anything that does not have any other Liechtenstein dimension, then I use the lawyer from Liechtenstein, or I'm registered in Liechtenstein, but the people who are going to transact, who are going to exchange, are somewhere else. It doesn't really it cannot really be used, right?
That's true. If there are consumers, you have all of these consumer protection laws, and they cannot opt in to that legal framework, so place of jurisdiction and to the law. So it's limited. Totally agree. And the idea was, I mean, we are well aware of that, but the idea is that this might become interesting for other jurisdictions. And we already saw that Germany, Austria, the United States, a lot of other jurisdictions have a look at our draft, and they are considering if this makes sense or not. I mean, in Europe, if you ask me in person, I think hopefully we will have a harmonized approach. If it is like this, I don't know. If it's differently and solving some of the problems, that's perfectly fine. But we will have to wait years to see that.
But at the end of the day, what you're doing, I think it makes a lot of sense, is to export a modernized version of the German concept of a notary.
Yeah.
To say, okay, and this is the business model for all the notaries that were going to be disintermediated by blockchain technology to start with.
I mean, there are other roles like the TC protector or the verifying authority, the identity service provider, where you have the registry of the already identified addresses and stuff. So there are a lot of thoughts into it. I mean, I just want to show you the two links. If you want to read it, they are public. There's an English version as well. There's a German and an English version of it. Please have a look at it, and I think I'm already 1 minute over my time.
So closing remarks, and then we'll move on to next presentation.
If there are I think I talked more than 30 minutes now. If you have any questions, you can approach me by mail afterwards. Luca, please.
You mentioned securities a couple of times.
Yes.
Inside this project. So when you're potentially touching something that is security-like or actually a security inside of this trusted technology framework, does this trigger then everything else that fall under the financial market regulations from Perspective Directive, MiFID, MiFIR, MAR, and everything? Or is this some kind of an exemption where you can potentially deal with types of securities under the proposed law without going for it?
I will not go to the slide, but you cannot have exemptions. The room of maneuver there is so small, that's not possible. No, it's not. It's actually, if it is a security, it's a security. Yeah, like if it walks like a duck.
That's a good analogy. Thank you, Thomas.